There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today. I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon. This is episode number 259. And today in the show, we are breaking down the ridiculously successful 2018 hunting season had by my friend Andy May, with the goal of helping us all learn how to become more efficient bow hunters. Hey guys, before we officially kick off the show, I wanted to just share a couple quick thoughts, I guess, as this is our last episode of 2018. And this year it's been a big one. There have been so many changes and new projects and new partnerships, not to mention the changes in my regular life, a la having a baby and all of that. And all along the way through all of that, you guys and girls, the Wired to Hunt community, have stuck along for the ride, and you've followed along, and you've supported me in Wired to Hunt, and you've shared your stories and your feedback and your questions, and it's just something that I want you to know that I'm paying attention to and that I'm appreciating so much. You know, I end each one of these episodes by saying thank you. Hopefully most of you guys are making it to the end and hearing that, but if not, I wanted to make sure to bump this up to the very beginning, because it's just that important. You need to hear this. You know, Wired to Hunt is nothing without all of you. This community that you all have formed around this whitetail hunting lifestyle, and that I've just been lucky enough to be able to serve through Wired to Hunt, it is a badass thing. So I want to make sure you all knew that. And moving on, as I mentioned, this is also the last episode of the year. So I want to wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. Hopefully you're going to be able to get out there and still do some hunting here before the end of the year. Hopefully you'll have some snow, some cold weather, maybe get a delicious Christmas backstrap on the grill for the holidays. All those good things I hope are in your future. And one other Christmas-related thing, little house cleaning item that I guess I should mention here is that we do still have that 20% off promo on Wired to Hunt hats, shirts, and decals. Just head on over to themeateater.com if you're interested. You'll see the store there. You can use the promo code WIRED at checkout. That's WIRED. And that is it from me here on the front end. We've got a really interesting episode for you today with one of the very best deer hunters that I personally know. And every time that I get him on the podcast, I'm particularly excited because I know that he's going to have some thoughts and some experiences that are going to help me and all of you. So let's just get right to it. All right, welcome to another episode of the Wired to Hunt podcast brought to you by Onyx. And I'm here today with my good buddy, Andy May. And Andy, it's kind of interesting. I was just sitting here thinking about this. For like maybe not 5 years, but for several years, probably 2 to 3 years, I was begging you to come onto the podcast, and you would never do it. And then finally, like, we broke the seal last summer, and now all of a sudden I feel like you're liking it because you keep on accepting my invitations to come back. So I'm glad that you opened up to it a little bit.
Yeah, I was very reluctant at first. I actually had, Hunting Beast ask me and couple other people, and it was just a little out of my comfort zone, I guess. That was the only reason. I was just, nervous. I'd sound like an idiot, and I didn't feel like I'd be real interesting to talk to. But once we did it, it was fine. It's just like talking, with anybody about hunting, so it works.
Yeah, man. The key for me is that I just accepted that I sound like an idiot, and I just just embraced that and move forward.
Right. Yeah.
That's been the key to my success.
Yeah, there you
So
go.
we've had a handful of podcasts together now over the last year and a half or so. We've dove into a couple different topics. You were on one of the Q&A podcasts with me and Dan. You were on the show, obviously, where you and me broke down our Nebraska hunt together. But you and me, we got to talking the other day when we were covering Frank, just about how you had, and like you do every year, you had such an incredible season here in 2018. And me and Corey and Furter and Dustin were all kind of standing around like, geez, oh Pete, like how does he have so much success every single year without like almost no vacation time? It's not like you've got some huge fancy farm or anything. I mean, you're hunting public land or by permission stuff. You're doing it after work or little weekends here and there. And somehow this year you killed a mule deer, an antelope, 2 mature bucks in Michigan, and a mature buck in Ohio. And that's just kind of the norm for you. We kind of on our group text message thread, me and my buddies, just refer to you as like the machine. And we say that very negatively and with a lot of bitterness. So Andy, what I'm wanting to do today, if you're up for it, and if you're not, we can just hang it up and we can go our separate ways. But if you're down, I kind of wanted to just kind of walk through your season, kind of use the 2018 season, I guess, as like this example that maybe the rest of us can learn from, and kind of try to break down how you are so damn efficient. How you do this stuff on a pretty short amount of time, without a lot of the advantages that some other people might have. So yay or nay? Is that a game plan you're up for?
Yeah. Let's go for it.
All right, cool. Before we do go any further, I just gotta say this was a particularly cool year. I feel like because we've talked for quite a number of years now. You did a couple podcasts with us in the past, but I feel like we started hanging out a little bit more this year. You've been helping me try to deal with some archery issues I've been having. Then we got to do that hunt together, and then I got to help you recover your big Michigan buck, and then you came and helped me recover my buck here in December. It's just been neat to be able to take, what was, for a long time, I felt like a mentorship from afar. I felt like I was trying to learn from you and kind of dig into what you're doing from a distance. And this year, to be able to do that kind of a little bit more in person, bouncing ideas back and forth via text a lot. I guess without getting too cheesy, I just want to thank you for that. It's been really helpful. So it's been cool.
Yeah, no problem. It was fun, kind of following along with you. Specifically on the big one here in Michigan and strategizing together, and I really enjoyed that. Not to mention, our hunt in Nebraska. So it's been my pleasure.
Yeah, it's been a good time. So when I was out in Montana, the first week in September, I think this is right. Correct me if I'm wrong if I'm on my dates here, but I'm pretty sure when I was out there in Montana chasing whitetails, you were out in Wyoming at the very same time, right? That was when they were going on?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah. So you're out there on an antelope and mule deer hunt. You had 2 tags. Let's start there. I know we're mostly whitetail focused, but I feel like you've just started dabbling into western hunting the last 2 years, and really quickly you've kind of developed a knack for it, at least as far as antelope and muleys. Can you give us the quick overview of what that trip was like and how you were able to pull it off on such a quick turnaround?
Yeah. Well, it kind of started last year in 2017. I went out to that area just on an antelope hunt and was successful out there. Went out there with a couple of buddies, and obviously, there's an abundance of game out there. So while we were out there, we for sure had our eyes on the whitetails and the muleys, and it's considered like a general area or a general region in Wyoming. At the time, it didn't take any points to draw, so it's considered more of an an opportunity area rather than like a limited entry. So, it's not an area you go expecting to kill, Boone and Crockett caliber type critters, but everything we saw out there, we felt like it was definitely worth coming back. We had a blast, and we saw plenty of animals that, we would have been happy with. We don't worry too much about size or score. So we made the plan, applied for the antelope tag again and the mule deer tag. So we all went out there except for one buddy. He only did deer. And we went out there, and so we already had three of us already had a fairly good idea of the lay of the land, where the public boundaries were. We were able to call a few landowners out there and, pay a trespass fee that accesses, thousands and thousands of acres of public land. Because there's specifically in the area we were in, there's a giant chunks of public that's landlocked. And it's unfortunate, but you can't get to it without permission from one of the surrounding landowners. And a lot of them aren't real friendly about giving permission and, want to charge money for it. So we went that route. We found some good deals. So, we literally had, more acreage than you could ever dream of hunting, pretty much all to ourselves. The pressure was very, very low. But we got out there a few days before the deer season opened. So antelope opens mid-August. We got out there, the last couple days of August, and the plan was to antelope hunt for a few days and then, kind of switch our focus over to deer. So,
and if I'm right, this was a rare situation for you where you actually were able to take a pretty decent amount of time off of work. Because of your job, you don't get to do that too often, but didn't you have like 5 days off so you would be able to have a full week and weekends if you needed it? Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I had some sick time saved up, and we do get a couple personal days a year. That's considered our time off because, I work in a school. Our vacations are, spring break, Christmas break, that sort of thing. So we don't get like weeks off, but you can use those personal days, whenever you want. And I just chose to kind of use them all for this trip because it was, for me, this is maybe not once in a lifetime, but this was the first time I had ever done anything like this, to this length, I guess.
And did you feel, given that, sorry to interrupt you, I mean, you are a very experienced hunter. You've done it a lot when it comes to whitetails. But like you said, this was a pretty new thing. You did the antelope deal last year, but this is your first time chasing muleys, only your second time ever in this area at all. Coming into the hunt, what did you have a high confidence level, or were you just kind of winging it and hoping it was going to go well? I mean, where was your head at the beginning of this thing?
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because I was going to kind of allude to this later in the discussion, but I'll mention it now. And I kind of saw it this year because I hunted with you. I hunted with 3 different buddies in Wyoming, and I really see, I guess, a difference in maybe the confidence, of different hunters. And it's nothing negative. I'm not trying to say any one way is bad or anything, but when we were in Wyoming, we were all excited. But after the first few days of kind of driving around and scouting, we saw very few deer, like very few. And, guys started to get a little worried, rightly so. It's expensive tag, time away from the family. And, I could see some guys maybe getting a little, maybe panicky, I'd say that maybe a little panicky, maybe not enjoying the hunt as much as they could have. I mean, we still all had a blast, don't get me wrong, but I just could see that. But inside, I always felt like we would figure it out. We're all good hunters. We got the time. We're going to figure out the deer. We're going to find them. And I mentioned that to a couple of friends. I was like, just don't worry about it. We're going to find them. We're the type of guys that go out there and we're hunting, dark to dark, and we're not really stopping to take lunch or rests or naps. I mean, we're full bore the whole time. So I knew it would happen. Confidence, at least on my end, of finding mule deer was high. I knew we would with time. Same way in Nebraska. We were a little worried. We were a little like, low deer numbers. This isn't quite what we expected. But deep down, I felt like we were going to find deer. We know how to do that. So,
and I felt like even though in the beginning we were kind of like joking, like kind of darkly joking, like, this could get rough. There was no negative attitude. That was something that, I thought was so important. We had to keep a positive attitude about it and keep that sense of confidence. Otherwise it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy if you don't.
Yeah. So I didn't, to answer your question, I guess that was a long way of answering it, but I didn't go there thinking, I'm going to shoot a good mule deer 100%. But I had full confidence that I was going to find them, that all of us were going to find them and get into them and have some opportunities.
Gotcha. And that's kind of what I figured. I feel like there's some people who I think confidence in a general hunting skill set can translate from species to species. Like there's a certain level of stick-to-itiveness that I think you have, and that a lot of other people I talk to have. That they're gonna make it happen. They'll figure it out. They're gonna observe. They're gonna try things, and they're gonna keep adjusting and learning off of whatever mistakes they make. I think that's a real consistent thing I see across the best hunters I know. So you headed in there with a level of confidence that you guys would be able to figure it out. The first few days though, it's pretty slim pickings. You're not seeing the deer. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, well, the first few days we focused on antelope. That was that's one, man, I recommend that for everyone to go out and chase antelope with a bow. Very difficult. They live in an area that's, they like the plains. They like to be able to see, long distances. So spotting and stalking, real tricky. And I had my work cut out. Last year I got one on my third stalk ever. So I was like, I'm pretty good at this. But, this year, I felt like I wasn't so good at it. I think I had, 10 or 12, failed stalks. And it was just not working out where the antelope were. It wasn't real conducive to getting close or the real high winds. So the long range shots weren't really, effective. But, I ended up focusing, on some water. It seemed like it was real dry there. So there was big concentrations near water. Instead of like kind of driving around and looking for good ones, we just started kind of focusing more on those, those small areas that had water, because there wasn't a lot of it around. And, we ended up having some luck. I ended up getting one, and actually two of my buddies, both missed. And then another guy came back during the rifle season and ended up getting one. So we went one for 3, I guess I should say, on antelope. So they were tricky this year. They were difficult. But then we changed the focus to mule deer, and that's what everybody was, I guess, most excited about, because it was our first time. And like I said, very few deer the first few days, and I don't even know if we saw any bucks. But we just started spreading our wings. We were hunting in groups of 2 for the most part. 2 guys went this way on this piece, and 2 guys went this way on this piece. And opening day came, and a buddy of mine, Justin, actually, he ended up hunting this piece of public all day long, all by himself. I don't know how many miles he put on, but it was some, real high temps and a lot of like open, like desert type canyon, brutal conditions. And he ended up getting one right in the last 20 minutes of shooting light. He ended up getting a nice 2x2. And he even said, because the lack of deer sightings, he shot a buck that, maybe he wished he would have passed on. He was super happy with it, but because the low deer numbers, or, having trouble finding deer, he took the shot and made a great shot, and he didn't go far. So we started off on a good note. But then we just started, doing the glassing thing, basically, setting up on different vantage points and glassing, just like you see on, the guys, the expert mule deer on YouTube and stuff. We took that approach, used glass, and tried to find, a buck that was worth going after. And me specifically, I think it was second day of the season, glassed up a good one. I couldn't tell what he was. I could just tell he was really wide. And, I was basically, I was like, well, you know what, let's do it. This is the first stalk of my Wyoming trip. And I was so pumped. And I don't know, kind of a long story, but I crossed a lot of ground, got in a river bottom ditch, and snaked through a lot of belly crawling. The last 50 yards, took my boots off and got to within 25 yards of a group, I think it was 6 bucks, and came to full draw, popped my head up over the hill, and, there he was. And I noticed he was a 3x3, probably 22 inches wide, just a beautiful buck, but it was the second day of the season, and I decided to pass. And had all that on video, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was neat. And I was like, right then I was just addicted to this type of hunting. I'm like, this is the stuff right here. And, I love sitting in a tree stand too. And I can, I love that style of ambush hunting, but this was different. And I was in heaven, and I really, something I want to do, many, many more times in the future for sure.
I can attest to that, because in Nebraska, at least once every day, you'd be like, man, I kind of really want to get out there and look for some mule deer.
Yeah, I've been bit by the bug, I'm afraid. But so anyway, a lot of cool hunts in between. There's this public piece that we noticed. Actually, one of my buddies said he was driving down the road, back to the cabin, and he said, man, there's a big bachelor group of mule deer in this field. So we got on the map and we looked, and they had crossed. What we figured out, what they had come down out of the public and crossed, and they were in this rancher's field. So drove by the next day, and we kind of marked where we saw them. So I just made an educated guess, like, imagine like these, fairly decent sized mountains, hills, canyons, and then a big flat of sage, for a good, quarter mile. And I was like, okay, if they, they're bedded up there and they kind of snaked through this sage somehow. So I found like a little low spot, where I assumed like if there was going to be some bucks coming out of those hills, they'd kind of want to stay hidden. So it was one of those scenarios where there's no cover. So my hunt was basically on my stomach, like in the sage bushes. And I completely just, went with my instinct of where I thought they would come through. And it ended up being one of the coolest hunts, because a big parade of bucks came out of those hills, and one just giant. And they came down, and they were coming, and I was about 50 yards out of range. And I tried kind of belly crawling, commando crawling over there and getting closer, but I just wasn't able to do it. So I ended up hunkering down, letting them pass right by me, and then just kind of watched where they entered the field. So now I knew where to set up. Now I knew, like, I saw them do it once. I was like, okay, now we can get them the next day. So the next day, had a buddy that he had shot and missed an antelope and was kind of down, and he set up on that spot. Actually, I walked him. It was weird. This public the boundary is 50 yards off the road, but you can't cross onto it there. So you have to go down and park at this access, and to get where these mule deer were coming out of this hill, it was about a mile and a quarter. So you got to go down, park down here, and then walk basically along the road, because along the road was private. So it's kind of a weird setup, but I walked him to the spot where those deer had come out of the hills and walked right through. And I said, just lay right here, and they're moving early. You're going to see them, and you'll be able to shift a little bit if you need to. And he hunkered down and was texting me back and forth, and they ended up coming down, and they were just off a little bit of where they were the night before, but he ended up getting a shot at the big one, and he ended up missing. So it was kind of a heartbreaker. He had a couple tough 2 days, but really a cool, exciting hunt. And then let's see, my buck was about 20, maybe 20 minutes down the road on another piece, and same type of deal. I got up, set up in the dark up on the hill, and was glassing down. I was in a spot where I could see 3 canyons, and it starts getting daylight, and I look on the opposite side hill, and I see 2 bucks feeding. And it was really interesting because this area of where we were at in Wyoming, I would call it like desertish. It's kind of like desert mule deer, really dry prairie grass, very, very little green unless it's irrigated. And on this side hill, there was just a little bit of green, just a little bit of green grass, like new growth, just a few inches of it. And those deer were right on that spot, similar to what we saw in Nebraska. Mm-hmm. It was just like that stuff was like a premium there. They were hitting it like a food plot almost. Yeah. And that day the wind was whipping, and I see them over there, and I'm like, everyone says, okay, glass them, watch them bed, and then you can sneak up to them in their bed. That's the best way to do it. And I was glassing them, and it was real windy, and I was just like, man, I think I can get over there now. I mean, it was 2 canyons over, so it was a good way, and I'm in the wide open. So what I decided to do is I was going to go after him right now. I said, I think if I run, I can get over there and get a shot. So I kind of like belly crawled backwards, keeping my eye on him, and snuck around this hill. And then right when I was out of view, I just started sprinting, and I went around my hill, and I went way upwind. That was the only risky part, is I had to go upwind to these deer. The reason I risked that is 2 reasons. 1, it was blowing 30 miles an hour. And 2, I thought if I can get enough upwind, I think I'll be safe. So I just sprinted straight away from them until I thought I was safe. Then I sprinted straight to the west, and then I circled back around. And they were just on the side of this, I call it a mountain. It wasn't really a mountain, but mountainous to us Michigan guys, a big hill. And as I was sprinting across, I looked, and I knew there was 3 humps in this hill, and I knew they were feeding right under the 3rd hump. So I got on the back side of the hill that they were on, and then I just started side hilling it. And that by now I'm kind of out of breath, so I'm slowing down. I'm trying to get my heart rate down because I know there's going to be a shot coming up. And I get to the kind of the base of the hill, and I'm counting the humps. So I see the first hump, and I'm going the second hump, and now I'm at the base of the 3rd hump. And I'm like, okay, they're right over this edge. So I peek up, kind of like crawl up to the top, and I peek my eyes over, and they're both still right there. And wow. I was thinking, like, how they say, like, you don't have to be like, super, in super great fitness to do this hunting stuff. And you definitely don't. And I'm not saying I'm super fit, but I was thinking, like, there's probably a lot of guys that couldn't have done that. Oh
yeah.
When I did my track, it ended up being just under 3/4 of a mile that I ran. And
this wasn't flat terrain either, right? We're talking some canyon stuff, right?
Yeah. It was up and down. Yep. And it was just, I don't know, the adrenaline was going, and you know what I mean? I just went for it. But there might've been, I think out there, if you could be in some decent shape, it definitely helps. Yeah. A lot of walking, a lot of hiking. When some guys maybe get tired or sore, it make you want to quit, but it ended up working out, and I got to that spot, peeked my eyes over the edge, and they were right there feeding. So I ranged him, and there was two, and both of them were pretty nice, but I obviously ranged the bigger one. And he was at 61 yards, and it was an interesting setup because, like I said, there was some really high winds, but where I was just on the leeward side of the hill, so I wasn't feeling any wind, but they were in the wind. So I kind of forgot about the wind and what it was going to do to the arrow. I drew back, and I was, pretty nervous, but I was trying to settle the pin, get steady, excited, I guess I should say. And I just let that pin float, put it right in the pocket there, and pulled with my back tension until the shot went off. It went off, everything felt perfect, and I just saw that arrow start drifting. And I ended up hitting him about 4 inches back of where I was aiming, and it was all wind drift. I know it was. I actually saw the arrow just kind of drift. So not a bad shot by any means, but not perfect. So I was a little rattled by that. He took off, ran down the canyon, and for the next 3 hours were like the most intense, exhilarating, panicking hunt, that part of a hunt that I've ever experienced. I was hoping that he was going to die in that canyon, and I got down on my knees and I just started glassing the bottom. And I don't know, about 10 minutes after I shot, I see him walking out, and I'm like, oh no, and then I can see the hole, and I'm like, man, gosh, it doesn't look that bad, but it's obviously not perfect. Then I was thinking liver. It looked like a liver. It didn't look like guts. It looked like a liver shot. And he comes out and he beds down, and I'm glassing him. Over the next couple hours, I'm just like, committed to not taking my eyes off this buck. And I'm just down glassing him intently, and he gets up 4 or 5 times, gets up, beds, gets up again, walks 30 yards, beds down. He keeps doing that. And then all of a sudden he gets up from like his 4th or 5th bed, and he starts walking kind of away from me, and he's starting to circle around the mountain. And so he's getting to a point where like he's going to get out of view, and I'm like, oh crap, and between me and the edge of that hill, there's probably 3 canyons. And I'm like, oh boy, here we go. So as soon as he goes around the corner where I can't see him, I just start huffing it. I grab my bow, I go down one canyon, up the next, down, up, just in time to peek over and see him go and bed down again. And it happened one more time. He ended up getting up one more time and going around the corner. And again, I had to go back down a canyon, back up around. It was just so much emotion. And it was excitement. I felt terrible that this deer was suffering. I knew he was going to die. And now at this point, I'm thinking, I just want to get an arrow in him and finish this off, because at first I thought he was going to expire pretty quickly, and he didn't. So now I was just fully intent on getting another arrow into him, and finally he bedded under this big tree, and where I was at, I ranged him, and he was like 110 yards or something, and I was like, oh man. So then I ranged this hill. There was this peak between him and I ranged that, and it said, I think it was 45 from where I was at. And I was like, okay, if I can get to that peak, and he's bedded right there, I'm going to have a shot. So I snuck down, crawled on my hands and knees, kind of up the side hill, just trying to be real quiet. And I peeked my head over, and he's still there. And, it's one of those situations where I just like had to calm down, catch my breath. I see him right there, ranged him, drew back, and put the finishing arrow into him. And he was done, a few seconds after that. So it was, I felt like crying. I felt like cheering. It was so many different emotions in in a, a couple hour span, like I was just toast. I was spent.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
So, not exactly, how you want it to go down, but it doesn't always go down the way you want it to, and I'm glad I was able to finish him off.
Yeah.
But that was pretty much the Wyoming hunt.
Intense.
Yeah,
It's an intense
very
hunt.
intense and fun. And, the guys I were with, that was something that stood out. Just good guys. And I really enjoy those types of hunts, where you maybe you're not hunting right with a guy, but, you got guys to come back to camp too and talk about things and strategize.
Yeah, I wish I had a situation like that here in Michigan. I was just thinking about that today, actually. Like, I love hunting kind of close to home, but at the same time, I miss that camp camaraderie type element to it. I feel like we almost need like a local camp that during the hunting season, when you're hunting, you don't go home to your wife. You go to the camp. All your buddies go to camp for a while. At least a few nights a year or something like that, so you can still have that trip type of social aspect. Even when you're hunting the local spots. But
for sure, that would be fun.
But looking back on that trip, if you could like pin it down again, this is your first time ever hunting mule deer, and you were able to figure it out in a handful of days and get it done because you guys left early, right? If I remember right.
We ended up leaving a couple days early because the guy I was with, that we drove down 2 vehicles, we had both tagged out. So
yeah, So what do you think was it that, other than being able to get a good shot, other than being able to make the stalk and everything, was there anything that you think helped you figure this out so quickly and on your first mule deer hunt, kill a great buck? Was it your preparation beforehand, or was it the fact that you, well, I guess I shouldn't answer it. I'll just let you answer it.
Well, my preparation beforehand was a ton of map reading. I had marked every water source within 50 miles of there. So I had all that marked. I had probably 30 glassing points marked. So I didn't want to go there and be searching for this stuff. I wanted to have them marked on a map and just go and kind of pick off those spots one by one. Now, it didn't end up happening exactly like that. What we found out was a lot of these big hills that you see in these big giant canyons, I was thinking in my head, I'd get up on the highest spots possible, and I'd glass into these giant canyons, and I'd see deer all over, and I'd pick one and go after. Well, what I found rather quickly was these deer were hiding in actually really small pockets, smaller canyons that you can't see from the highest peak. You have to, it's very chopped up land. And some of these, in fact, the little canyon or the cut that these 2 bucks were going to bed in, was really small. You wouldn't see them unless you were right on the hill I was at, you know what I mean? So they were still, they were still hiding, even though they were out in the open, if that makes sense. They were clearly visible from where I was at, but from a road, no way. So I don't know. I think we were just able to find the pattern quick. I definitely was prepared with the maps. I knew the areas. I knew kind of where I wanted to start. My shooting was prepared.
Would it be fair to say that you, from afar, I feel like something that you did here and something I sense that you do in a lot of your whitetail hunts too, is that you're not afraid to seek them out? Like, you don't get stuck just, okay, this is the spot I'm going to go, and I'm going to just stick it out and hunt there and hunt there and hunt there, and you keep doing the same thing and it doesn't work. I feel like I always hear about you having a plan to start, and then if that doesn't work, then you're checking out the next area, then you're checking out the next area, then you're checking out the next area until you find them, and then you keep adjusting and adjusting. That kind of sounds like that's what you did in this case. Right?
That's you described it perfectly, and I guess I was trying to find the words there, but it's more of like a systematic approach. Aggressive, but this time of year, I really just wanted to lay eyes on one, and then kind of work on the stalking and get some practice in with that. And, I was able to make it happen on my first 2 stalks I got within bow range. But yeah, it's just, I guess, relentless, looking, like you said, going from one potential spot to the next, to the next, to the next, and not wasting any time. Like, we knew we were on a short hunt, so we really just kind of, went all in on this hunt. And, they're deer. Like I said before, I feel like with enough time, we can narrow down, we can find them. And then it was just a matter of time of finding one that we were interested in going after.
Yeah. And like I said then, I feel like you take a similar approach to hunting whitetails too, especially in Michigan, it seems like, because I feel like every year you've got a whole bunch of different places, and then you are systematically working your way through those places till you find the deer you want to hunt. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, but I think that's true. And if so, can you tell me how you did that this year? Because it certainly sounds like you did it pretty well. But before we get to that, I want to take a quick second here to thank our partners at Whitetail Properties and hear from one of their land specialists about some scouting advice that, believe it or not, we're all going to be able to start applying here pretty soon, because the season is almost done and postseason scouting is just ahead of us.
This week with Whitetail Properties, we are joined by Justin Mason, a land specialist out of Illinois. And Justin is going to be telling us about what are some of his favorite scouting strategies for this time of year.
And my go-to spot at the end of winter has to be kind of those thick bedding sanctuary areas. Primarily I'm doing 2 things late winter, starting to look, for sheds, but then also trying to figure out, if I can nail down specifically more of the deer pattern, travel pattern. So I'll usually go into the kind of the south-facing slopes up towards the top of the ridge, find some of that thicker habitat with maybe some locust trees, because oftentimes they'll go to those locust pods and feed on them, or honeysuckle. Anything kind of the thicker the better, so that I can really dive into and see how they're traveling through it, and hopefully I can score and pick up a shed.
If you'd like to learn more and to see the properties that Justin currently has listed for sale, visit whitetailproperties.com/Mason. That's MASON.
We also want to take a second here to thank our partners at Onyx, and I'm actually here sitting looking at my Onyx Hunt app with my son, who's 11 months old. He's currently on my lap, and maybe you can hear him. He's touching the phone and touching the microphone. He's a big fan of the Onyx Hunt app, and apparently at this very moment, a big fan of the mic stand. But what we both like about this app is that it helps me find quality places to hunt. I actually was able to shoot a buck this year for the first time while having a son. Got to share that moment with him. He got to touch that buck, look at the antlers, and I use the Onyx Hunt app quite often during the hunt for that deer, as I was constantly thinking about where to hunt, where the wind was going, where this deer might be, and always having the maps available on my phone were a huge benefit. So I would definitely recommend checking out Onyx if you're interested in a mobile hunting map application. You can find it over on your mobile app store of choice, or check out onyxmaps.com.
Yeah. With Michigan, I do use that approach. I know all the areas I hunt really, really well. And just like you, the areas that you've hunted for years and years, you're a very, an astute hunter. You look at the why on everything, and, why is this happening? When is this happening? And, I start to see trends. I start to see trends in certain areas. I start to see trends in certain deer. So basically what I do is I kind of try to time my hunts, and time my efforts to when those areas or those particular deer are most vulnerable. So for instance, there might be, I got some spots that tend to be good early season, but during the rut, there's no deer there. So I focus my time there in the early season, and vice versa. I have some spots that are just tend to heat up during the rut. or late October. Sometimes there's a certain buck that, has shown vulnerability in the last couple of years in late October, or, that first week of November, or sometimes it's early season. So I start to develop a plan like that, in all the areas I hunt. And with that, obviously trying to find, a handful of deer that I'm interested in going after. It doesn't always happen like that, but I think that's kind of why, or how I'm able to have consistent success and be efficient. Like, as you say, I know where I want to be late October, and it's not just one spot. There might be 2 or 3 spots.
How many?
Might be more than that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask, how many different quote unquote spots did you have lined up that you could hunt this year? Let's just say in Michigan. I'm trying to kind of wrap my head around how many different options you're kind of bouncing around with as possibilities.
Yeah. There's probably maybe a dozen between shared permission private land and some public pieces that I try to kind of keep tabs on. I like to know what's going on there, that I scout regularly, that I feel real confident in what the deer herd is like, if there's a good one in there, if there's potential for good ones in there. So, I'm always losing ground. I'm always trying to scout new pieces. So it's a constant evolution, but, I'll throw Northern Ohio in there too, because I live right near the border. There's a couple areas that I hunt down there too. Same type of thing. I really starting to learn patterns. So when a good one shows up, when a good one shows up on any of these pieces, I know the spots where I can kill them. And I know the time of year that they tend to be, when those spots tend to heat up, I guess.
Yeah.
Like you said, I don't remember who said it, but knowing your DNA of the farm.
Yeah.
Was that Drury?
Yeah, Terry Drury always talks about that. Knowing the DNA of your farm. Yeah.
Perfect example. Yeah. So it's just kind of knowing when the area you're hunting, it has the highest potential. And, that's when I focus my efforts and I don't push it. Now I might try to, do a little scouting here, on the outskirts and maybe checking some cameras and doing some glassing. And that's what led to my, my November buck in Michigan this year. But, I really try to just focus my time when it's most effective in those spots, in those areas. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to. But then if there's an individual buck that I'm after, there tends to be, there can be some trends there too. So it really depends on the situation. But I think once I started really looking at that stuff and focusing on that stuff and trying to kind of, I guess, time my hunts when things were most productive, my success started going up more.
Yeah. And for anyone listening, sorry to jump in here, but anyone who's listening, if you didn't listen to the podcast that me and Andy did off of our Nebraska hunt about 2 months ago or whatever that was, you really should go back and listen to that. I won't belabor you guys with this again, but Andy walked through this whole process, the whole process that you use as far as journaling all of your hunts, documenting all this information. I got to believe that that's a huge part of the reason why you're able to so effectively figure out the DNA of each of these different spots, is because you are meticulous about taking note of everything, observing everything, and documenting it so you can go back and look and say, oh, well, wow, over the last 10 years, the last 5 years, this was a trend on this property, and this is a different trend on this other property. And, all that stuff over half a decade or a decade can kind of disappear into the nethers of your brain if you're not finding a way to actually document it. And you do a damn good job of doing it seems like.
Yeah, that definitely helps. And I really like looking back at that. And I also have, I think I've told you before, for whatever reason, I forget what my wife tells me, an hour before, but I have really good recall with deer stuff. Yeah. I do have really good recall. I can remember, I can remember what this buck did last year, during this time, and without having to go back to my notes so much. So that helps, and another thing too, that kind of was more, at least with my November buck this year, and the Ohio buck for that matter, a lot of my success happens with finding, acting on like recent information, like right now, like the current information that I can get, whether it's a track, whether it's a sighting, whether it's a trail cam picture, an observation, but being able to capitalize on that and move in right then and there, similar to how you did with Frank. He hung around a little bit, but you were able to move in quickly when he was there and when he was with that hot doe. And you came really close several times to getting him. But being able to do that, and being able to capitalize that by being able to jump in there right when that sign tells you to, is huge. And I'm in a decent situation around home here because I'm able to scout a lot, even though I can't hunt all the time. I'll check cameras at lunch, or I'll go walk a field edge at lunch and look for tracks. I'm scouting constantly. I like to know what the deer are doing. I like to know, if a big buck has showed up. So I'm trying as much as I can to kind of figure that out as the season goes along, so I can capitalize on a moment's notice. Glassing before work. I almost never go to work. I'll get up early and I'll go glass. Or the days I can't hunt, if nothing's going on, I'll try to do something that will help me be successful. But that has been also a huge help in.
Oh man, yeah.
Just being able to recognize when you need to get in there. And obviously you miss some things, but if you look hard enough and you're persistent and committed, I think one can capitalize on a lot of those situations.
Yeah. So something that when it comes to this is something I'm trying to get better at, and I think, for example, this year it worked out for me with Frank, is finding ways to learn about an area without impacting that area. So with Frank, I was fortunate I could easily watch a decent chunk of this property without needing to go in there and hunt it. So I kind of did the long distance observation thing. But I'm always trying to figure out with different spots, how can you watch it or learn it or check cameras or do scouting without, pressuring those deer. And you were telling me, I don't think we talked about this on the last podcast, but you shared with me an example of a late season buck that you had found last year, and you almost got a shot at him, I think during rifle season or muzzleloader season, I can't remember which, and then you're hoping he would come back this year and you do the same thing, but you were just going to constantly monitor cameras in a spot where you could get to without spooking them, though. How do you, and this is something I talked to a lot of people about, this is kind of one of those like secret sauce things, like it's the silver bullet. How do you keep tabs on recent intel without educating the deer? How does that work in your mind?
Yeah, I think it depends on the area. Obviously an area that's, more chopped up and open, like maybe if there's one spot that's pretty close to my work, and I'm able to check cameras there pretty often, as often as I like, really. So what I do is I'll check cameras, or I'll go walk the perimeter of the crop field, and I'll look for tracks. I'll check those cameras. But where I'm walking and where I'm scouting is not where I hunt. It's not where I set up to kill. But I do like to get that information. So, I might check, and I might check the cameras, and there's nothing, and then a few days later, nothing. Yeah. But these are in areas, keep in mind again, where I don't care if I really bump a deer here because it's nowhere near where I'm hunting. It's more or less, I want to know if they're in the area because this is where they come. And it's usually after dark, but if one shows up, then I feel like, if one starts using the area, then I feel like I know where I can get them.
Gotcha.
So that's one example. Another example, there's this other area I hunt that's, has a big swamp. You can't really, tracks and that sort of thing is a little bit harder. So I might go in and check a camera, but I'm checking it, I'm trying to do it on I try to check cameras on two situations: rain or really windy, dry conditions. Like, so, if you get a week with no rain and then it's real windy, those are really tough conditions too for a deer to scent you on the ground. And, just the cover. So I use any means necessary. Glassing too, I use a lot of glassing. So it really depends on that, the situation you're in and the type of property you're hunting, or the type of, what the cover's like on that piece of public or whatever. So it really just depends. It's kind of a tough, there's not a one size fits all for that question, I guess.
Yeah, no, there's definitely not. So then I guess walk me through, because you alluded to a couple of these upcoming hunts where you were doing some of these things, but let's start in mid-October. We had this cold front hit. I was all excited about the cold front hitting. It was like October 12th or something, or 13th, or I don't know, somewhere in that ballpark. And one of these nights it was kind of rainy and cold, and I get the text message from you saying you shot a big one. How did that all come to be?
Yeah, that was an interesting one, because this was a buck that, had some history with. In fact, 2 years ago, what's really interesting about this buck is 2 years ago, I've only seen him one time, and that was 2 years ago, and it was on November 4th. But where I saw him, he was standing in the exact same spot where I shot him this year.
Wow.
Yeah, which is real interesting.
Yeah.
And not the same time of year. This was mid-October when I got him, and I saw him during the rut 2 years ago. But 2 years ago, he also, that's not true. I did see him. I saw him late season also. So he showed up late season again, and I had already shot a couple bucks in Michigan, and he was a good deer then. He had, the mule deer split, and so I decided to let him go and just pray, that he wasn't going to get shot. This area does get quite a bit of pressure around, but I think as far as, your average Michigan property, there's more guys passing some deer, in this general area. So there tends to be a few that slip through the cracks and get to that, 3, 4, sometimes even 5, it's not many, but usually there's, maybe one like that. So anyway, 2 years in a row, or 2 years ago and last year, he showed up late season. And so we just my buddy and I just figured that would be the chance, that we'd have at this buck. And on October 12th, on the day you're talking about, there was a cold front and some kind of light rain, real good conditions for deer movement. But, if I'm being completely honest, I was in there after a different deer, and was set up the way my partner, my buddy, was set up in one spot, and I was set up in another. And we, when we do hunt together, we don't get out as much together as we used to. But when we do hunt together, it's usually in a strategic way where, if the deer does show, there's a really good chance one of us will get a crack at them. We kind of hunt off each other and try to cover all the bases. So we were actually after a different deer that had been visible and showing some vulnerability. And, out of the blue, I look up, in the rain, and this buck is standing there, and I immediately know who he is.
Can you describe this spot? Why you wanted to be there? Why he was there?
Yeah. It's like a set aside field, really tall, weeds, grasses. So it's a field where it serves as bedding. We routinely see, decent bucks bed in this stuff, and in specific spots in that field, I might add, year in and year out. And they feel really comfortable moving through that. If I could hunt any type of habitat, it would be like set aside, like CRP, like that tall grass stuff. Yeah. I just love that.
Me too.
And the deer just really seem to feel comfortable in there. So, it's not uncommon for, especially in October, mid-October, late October, to have a good buck bedding in one of the beds in this field. I was not expecting that buck, but I was expecting this other buck, which was a 10-point. And I can't say for sure that buck that I ended up killing came out of the bed that I think he did. But he certainly came from that direction. And that's a spot where we've routinely seen, big bucks bed, and my buddy Mike has killed one out of there, and I've passed a few out of there. And it's to describe it, maybe this will help some listeners. If you got a field, a CRP field, imagine it's kind of like rolling hills, and it all tapers down into one really low spot. And, you normally hear about bucks wanting to bed high where they can see.
Yeah.
Well, year in and year out, that low spot, specifically there's like a bunch of young saplings in there, but it's the lowest spot in the field. And there's a buck bedded there often, especially on a west wind, which it was that day. So what I think they do, and what I've seen them do, as darkness approaches, half an hour before light, they rise out of this bed, and they just kind of stand there, and they just drink in all those thermals coming down to them.
Yeah.
And literally for nearly, 180 degrees on a west wind, like everything's just kind of coming right down to that spot.
It's one of those thermal sinks, right?
Exactly. That comes right down to there. So it's not a spot I anticipated, but I don't know, it's 4 or 5, maybe 6 years ago now. I videoed a real big buck in there, and my buddy Mike ended up shooting that deer a day or two later. But yeah, it's just a spot that they routinely use, and I think that's why it just gives them all the advantage of being able to smell the surrounding area, everything in that field. And this is a pretty decently high deer density area. So when does come into that CRP and move towards the food sources and stuff, like they can smell all that. They can just sit right in that low spot and get all those thermals.
So then how do you get away with hunting where you did?
So the trick is you need a west wind. Okay. So where I'm at in relation to where the bed is, I'm almost perfectly south. Okay. So if there's a west wind, it's blowing me right, not even past the bed. It's blowing me behind the bed. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. So like on a, if it was a dead calm night, that would be more of a risky situation. But anytime there's a west northwest, even a northwest, that stands money. And it just, because it's in line, it's almost in line with that bed. It blows right behind them, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So you get set up in that. I imagine, tell me if I'm wrong, but did you choose to hunt this property that night because the front came through and you're thinking, man, these are great conditions. I know this is a spot where there's this good buck. Tonight's the night to be in there, or what was the rationale behind making that strike on that day?
Yeah, well, that's interesting because this piece, I hunt it with a friend, one of my best buddies, and I don't hunt that place like I normally hunt. I hunt that place very conservatively, as does he, because we're trying to, I guess, I'm not trying to ruin his season by being overly aggressive, and he's trying. That's pretty much where he hunts all the time. So we hunt a little more passively, to be honest. We hunt in spots where if the deer are moving well, you can have some success. If they're not moving well, then, you're probably out of the game, if that makes sense. So,
yep.
We hunt it we set up spots for longevity, even though I only hunt it, a couple times a year. it's set up to hunt to kind of promote longevity of the season, I guess you should say. I guess you could say. But there are certain time frames that we know, these certain spots on this property can heat up. And mid-October, we've routinely have had good hunts in mid-October during cold fronts. So, yeah, you're exactly right. That's why we were out there that day. There was a good drop in temperature and, a light rain and, just everything kind of set up for good deer movement.
So you're there. He shows up. Exact same place you saw him 2 years earlier. Yeah,
which was kind of strange. Literally standing in the same spot. It would go in a different direction, but standing in the same spot. And he kind of comes in, and I think he kind of crested that hill, and he locked onto me. And I was like, oh my, like how did he even know? Like, how does he know? Like, I'm blended in so perfectly. And he just like stared a hole into me. And I was just like, I was in such awe because I thought he had busted me, and I wasn't moving or doing anything, but he did catch me off guard. I just wasn't expecting, a buck like that to just appear out of nowhere.
And you weren't like hung out in a tiny tree either, right? This is like a big oak or something like that.
Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of tree it is, but it's a big bushy tree. It's tons of limbs and branches and stuff. I mean, you're tucked in there good. And I don't know if he was staring at that because maybe he had winded a hunter in there before. I don't know, but he definitely locked on, and I just held still, and I don't know, maybe 20 seconds went by. We were just kind of both standing there motionless, and then I saw him flicker his tail, and then I knew I was going to get a shot. So he started walking.
Isn't that the best feeling too? When they're locked on, you think you're busted, and then they do that tail flick that just says, okay, I'm all right.
Yep. And if you can just, I've been in that situation so many times. You can just hold still and be patient and wait them out. Sometimes it's minutes,
Sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes.
Yeah, sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes. That's right. But it was a relief to say the least. But then he started walking, and I was like, okay, he's in range. Whenever he stops, we're good to go. So he ended up stopping naturally, which is, what I always want. And I drew back and shot and hit him, and he took off. And it was kind of one of those weird deals where, I wasn't sure where I hit him, and that's kind of why I called you initially, because I was like, hey, a deer, I was kind of freaked out. Just a deer the size of the deer we'd have a little bit of history with, and I wasn't sure on the hit, and I was like, I just felt better maybe getting a dog out there. I'm not super confident, to be honest with you, in my tracking skills. I'm red-green colorblind. I don't know if you know that.
Well, you and me both, buddy.
Yeah. So I have a really hard time. I'm getting better at it because I'm starting to get better at other things, seeing other things. I usually like to have a couple friends come out just as backup, and and then we have a mutual friend that has an awesome tracking dog, so I just felt more comfortable given the situation, and because it was about to rain.
Yeah, it just started raining right after the shot, right?
Yeah, immediately after the shot, it started coming down. It started coming down pretty good too. So so then we we had our buddy Andy come out with the dog, and
she's a rock star.
She is. Yeah, we had definitely had trouble finding first blood. I don't know that I would have found it. I feel I for sure would have found the deer eventually, but the way the dog picked it up instantly, it just felt so good. Yeah, she was on it like in just a matter of minutes, and then she was kind of heading down the hill, and we're heading in the direction where the deer was going. We started down this crest, and we look up, and we can see my nocturnal, my lighted knock, glowing in the darkness. And I was like, I felt a sense of relief, because I knew I didn't get a pass through. I saw the arrow actually stay in the deer, but then I thought, well, what if he wiggled it out and it's just my arrow? So there was like relief and then panic, and we ended up going up there, and there he lay. So it was a really cool moment with, again, what I live for, just being around friends. I just love that. Not just for my recoveries, but for their recoveries too. I really enjoy that part of the hunt.
Yeah, that's a special thing to be a part of. I was really glad to be there, and that was a really, really awesome buck. I don't think you've done it justice in describing him yet. He's a super huge bodied, big necked. I mean, this is October 12th or whatever, and he had full blown like rut neck going on. And a typical 8-pointer, right? But just the most mass you could ever ask for on an 8-pointer. He's tight and tall, just tons of mass, and then these deep splits on both G2s, right?
Yeah, he's got the deep mule deer splits on both G2s, and I mean, I know there's heavier deer out there, but around the bases and that first part of the main beam, that's the one of the heaviest deer I've ever seen. The mass is just insane.
Yeah.
But he's a really cool, like, one of a kind deer for sure. He's like one of those ones that you'll never shoot one like it.
Yeah. I was blown away by that deer. Just an awesome buck.
Yeah.
So you kicked off your Michigan season well there. Now, from that point on, we can skip Nebraska. We covered Nebraska already pretty good.
Yeah.
But walk me through the rest of your Michigan season, because you had two more good opportunities, right?
Yeah. It was, late October, November. I just had some phenomenal hunts. I don't know if you remember, but I was texting you multiple times where, I was,
it seemed like every time you hunted, you were having some kind of awesome encounter. I was like, good Lord, man.
It was one of those years where, for whatever reason, call it luck, call it, just being dialed in. I don't know, but I was routinely getting on good bucks. It wasn't every hunt, but I was routinely having encounters and having close calls, and and it's not like these are all in one spot. These were all in different areas, but I was.
And what? And I apologize for always jumping in on you.
It's okay.
But can you tell me? I mean, right? There was no rut. There was no rut vacation. There was no big trip. Right? You were hunting weekends and then some evenings after work. Is that right? Or what else were you doing if that's not the case?
Yeah, that's the case. And it's funny because I really haven't hunted much during the rut in Michigan the last few years. That's usually when I try to hunt out of state more. But this year, because of Wyoming, I was real limited on what I could, make work, during the rest of the season. So I was actually kind of excited to hunt the rut in Michigan because I knew there were some good ones around, and I know these areas, and I just never give them the time they deserve during November, just because I have aspirations of hunting new lands and seeing new places and all that kind of stuff. But it was kind of cool to hang around home, and I was really aggressive with my in-season scouting. That goes back to to kind of really being tuned into what's going on in each area, when things are hot. And Can
you describe a couple specific examples of what you're doing at that time of year that was aggressive in that way?
Yeah, just I guess I was really trying to focus in on certain areas when where in the past they've been good during that time frame, and it just seemed like I was always on the mark with it this year, or doing a lot of in-season scouting. There's a lot of times I had that Mantis saddle and Predator platform. I used that this year, and I was just kind of gung-ho about hanging and hunting and being mobile, and I used that a lot, and was just really kind of the few hunts just kind of going in and hunting and setting up on hot sign or setting up on the ground, still hunting. I mean, I was trying it all. I tried the I had a hunt with a bow-mounted decoy. Had an awesome encounter with that. I was really just being real aggressive because I already had a buck down, and I was like kind of, I guess, shooting for the stars and just trying to make every hunt. Trying to make every hunt count. I wanted it to be a real, I guess, dialed in kill set that I felt really confident going in, that I would have success, or I was going to try to make it happen. So that was kind of my strategy.
So it's kind of like, would it be fair to say that in a lot of those cases you were kind of swinging for the fences with each hunt, and it was either going to be a home run or a complete strikeout, probably?
Yeah.
And would I be right in saying that the reason you can do that was because you had so many other options lined up? So if you swung for the home run on this spot and it didn't work out, it's okay that you blew out this little thicket or whatever because you knew you've got 7 other spots you can go and try it too, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, you got to remember too, I set up my season ahead of time to, I guess, I would never go into a season with having scouted 2 areas. I would never go into a season of scouted 5 areas. I'm going to go into each and every season having plan A and a backup and a backup for that and a backup for that and a backup for that. And, I enjoy scouting as much as hunting. So I feel like I'm more than prepared. I'm over prepared, if that makes sense. Yeah. And I've said this before, I would have to be extremely unlucky to not at least have some success because, I scout year round. Whenever I have free time, that's what I'm doing. I don't do much else.
Yeah.
So that helps a lot. That's huge for me. And I'm not saying that's what everybody needs to do or should do. It's just what I do.
Yeah. So walk us through then in Michigan. You're getting aggressive. You're shooting for the stars on each hunt. Every hunt's a kill hunt. Maybe describe the shot you did get, or a few encounters, or whatever you want to share on that front.
Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the November 12th buck, and then I did have 2 good hunts in northern Ohio during that time frame too, which actually led to my kill in Ohio in late November. But so the buck I got on November 12th, again, this was a buck I knew about. It was a buck that I had seen in the summer and had observed. I was able to actually visually find this deer's track. After I observed him, I was able to walk the field edge where I had seen him.
In the summer?
I like to do that. Yeah, this summer.
So you saw him in the summer, and then you actually said, okay, I saw that buck. I want to hunt that buck, so I want to go find his track. You actually did that.
Yeah, I did that, yeah.
You're a machine.
Anytime there's a chance to, I'm not gonna risk it all to go look at a track, but if I can get that piece, that can help me a lot. And I haven't always been able to do that on all my bucks, but this one in particular, I was able to. So anyway, he had a fairly unique track. I think I posted a picture of this online, but he had one toe that kind of curled over and was a little bit longer than the other one. So just, I didn't know at the time that would help me in killing this buck, but it ends up helping me. Just one of those things. He was not, I knew if I had an opportunity at this deer, I would shoot him because he's incredibly unique also, but he was not the buck the buck I really wanted. The buck I really wanted was a different 9-pointer that I told you about on the way to Nebraska. That was the one. But, I kind of knew, if I saw this buck, I wouldn't be able to hold off because he is a really kind of freakish, goofball. But anyway,
you got to describe what the heck that means.
Yeah.
Why is he a freakish goofball?
Yeah. Okay. So he's got this perfect side, right? He's got this perfect side of 5, like a beautiful half of a 10 point. And then his other side of the antler, it has a brow tine, and then the main beam starts squiggling up and down, up and down, up and down, almost like I don't even know how you'd explain it, like a worm, like, like a worm all curved up and down, like a wave almost, but they're all points. So he's got 8 on that side. And then he's got, at the end of all those little waves, he had 2 big giant hooks. One was like 7 inches, and then the one that was still on there, he ended up breaking one off, but the other one's like 9. So it's just a freak, just a really strange, odd rack. But anyway, I had seen him a couple times from like observation stands in October, way off where I couldn't hunt. He's on a piece of private that I can't access. And I was like, man, he is really cool. Like, you see him and you just know it's him. And so anyway, this is at a spot near my work where I routinely, and I don't do this everywhere, so I don't want the listeners to think this is the way I do things, but this is a spot where I check a camera often, every 2 days, every 3 days, because it's in a spot where I don't hunt. It's in an ag, on the, near an ag field. I'll walk the edge of the ag field and I'll check the camera. I go the same way in, same way out every time. And I just check it often. And all I want to know is when a deer is coming through. If a deer is going to come through, it's kind of hard to explain, come through the cover where I do hunt, this is where they end up.
And you're getting these pictures there probably at nighttime, right? And then you're assuming.
Yeah. Well, I'm mainly looking for the big 9, and there's nothing. There's no pictures. There's no tracks. I mean, this is a spot where if there's a big track, it's going to be the big 9, or the only other deer that had any size was this one. So I was 100% focused on the big 9, with the back of my mind knowing that this freak is out there somewhere. But between mid-October and, early November, mid-November, I didn't see that goofball one. I had no pictures, no tracks, nothing. I assumed he got shot, because most deer in this area just get shot. But it's still one of those spots where I have it set up where I check the camera often. I don't care if they smell me here, because I'm hunting them 200 to 300 yards away. In fact, it doesn't bother me at all. They come at night. This is a spot where they end up at night. So it's November. What day did I go out there? I shot him on the 12th. So it must have been the 10th. I can't remember if it was the 10th or the 11th. But I go out there, check the camera.
Midday?
Yep, midday. I usually do it right at my lunch. There's a couple spots where I'm I'll do some scouting, maybe check a camera, maybe kind of go, just I get an hour for lunch. So I'm lucky in the fact that I've got some spots near my work where I can get out and just check some low impact spots like this. And I checked the camera, and I didn't have anything on the camera, but on my way back out, like I said, I walk the perimeter of this field. I see a track, and it's a big one. And I'm like, oh, hadn't seen one there all year. And I look, and it's that track, the one with the curved foot, the longer toe than the other.
Wow.
And I was like, man, that's that freak deer. So I had no idea if it was, I didn't know what time, of day that happened. I assumed at night. This is a spot where, where these deer bed, I can't get close to. Okay, I can't hunt it. So I'm hunting off of that in some thick cover, but they do come over into this field, but it's usually at night. But the reason I decided to sit, even though I knew he was coming into this area, even though I didn't know when exactly, everything about this told me, if I'm going to have a chance at him, I'm going to sit back here at this spot. And I have this spot picked out because it funnels down between some terrain features and some water. So when deer kind of work off this big piece of private and they come through this area and then over to this field, there's a small doe herd over there too. So every year around this time, it starts to attract bucks. And this is not an area that usually gets a lot of buck activity, but I've killed one there November 4th, the 12th, and the 14th. So that funnel that I'm talking about is way off this field. It's way back in some really thick security cover, and I come in a completely different way that takes hip waders. So as soon as I saw that track, I was like, okay, now I got to start sitting that spot. And I had not sit that spot yet. And in fact, the funny thing is I've killed 3 bucks out of that stand, and they were all the first time I sat in it.
Wow.
So in the past, I had done it more with timing. I sat there November 14th because I knew, that time of year is when the bucks tend to start coming through that area, because they start to, I don't know what it is, if that little doe group there, comes in, if they have a couple does that come in right at that time or what, but that just always seems to be that kind of November 4th through the 15th is that little window there where that particular spot heats up. You can hunt it October, Halloween, nothing. And it's been like that. I don't know why. It's just goes back to, just knowing your areas, I guess. But anyway, so like I said, I get into this spot using hip waders. You got to walk through basically this high water, and you come in way behind all of that cover. So you're coming in kind of the backside, and there's a couple people that have hunted up in that field that I was talking about. So that field gets some pressure. So it keeps the deer back in this cover where I was hunting. And I snuck in there, and I got up in that spot, or got up in that tree. This was after work, and was just sitting there. And I don't know, it was one of those things I was kind of probably daydreaming. I should have seen this buck coming from a long ways away, but I didn't. And I kind of look up, and he's like at 35 yards, closing in fast. And this was about 30 minutes of daylight left. And I see him, and I see that big old hook coming off the one side, and I was like, oh man, there he is. So that track led me to sitting that spot at that time frame. I probably was going to start, I'd always put in a sit or two before the gun season there, because it routinely heats up during that time, and this year was no different. But I just caught his track, and that was the deer that I was moving in on. And it's just one of those situations where the terrain and that water, they don't have to go through that funnel, but they almost always do. It's just a really high percentage spot if you can just stay out. If you can stay out and wait till the time is right, it's just money. Is
your access an important part of making that spot work too? Because I feel like spots that are way back in the cover are so tricky to hunt when you're trying to go in for a afternoon sit like that.
Yeah.
How'd you pull it off without blowing everything out?
Yeah. Well, what I do is I go through this water, this high water. Most people, I guess, that would probably hunt that would go through the bean field and go through the cover, and there's a funnel. They're going through a lot of the thick stuff, and would totally bump at least the doe groups out. There's never any bucks that bed there, but they would definitely blow out that cover. So where I come in is there's some high water. So you just put on some hip waders, and you just kind of slowly go through the water. And I come up low, and then up over the terrain feature I was talking about. It's basically just a little knob or a hill. And then I have a tree prepped right there. So, I don't know, occasionally bump a deer going in, but very rarely, because it's high water. Usually the deer aren't in that water.
Okay.
So yeah, it's a unique spot. And like I said, if you hunt it, if you go in there and you hunt October 1st and October 10th and the 15th and the 20th, and, you do that, you ruin the spot. You educate the deer that are living in there, which is a small doe herd. So it's just one of those spots that can really be good if you can be patient.
Yeah. And I feel like it was either past podcast conversation or maybe an article you'd written for Wired to Hunt in past years. You alluded to it with this case that the 3 kills you had in this property were all the first time. And don't you have record of some crazy number of your kills that were first hunt in a stand for the year? Isn't it just a very significant portion of your kills?
Yeah, I'd have to go back and update because there's been I did have a stat a couple of years ago. I'd have to go back and look at that, but I mean it was over 75% of the time it's the first sit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to be said for that. But there are definitely spots out there, and some guys will argue this, but there are definitely spots out there that you can, if the access is good and you're not bumping deer, you can hunt it repeatedly. It's those spots are kind of rare. And what I do in those spots is I try to identify when that area I have the highest percentage of getting that kill. If it's late October, okay, fine. If I have really good access, if I have the opportunity, I might sit a spot like that 3-4 times in a row. I've done that before, and just really hammer that time frame. When it's your chances are best. But those spots are hard to find. But when you do, they can certainly be really good.
Yeah, I feel like of course, you've got to have your wind plan nailed down to get a spot you can hunt over and over and over again. But then also I feel like you need that access and entry, or entry and exit nailed. So I have a spot like this where in the past I'd hunt it one time, and then trying to get out of there, you just blew out all sorts of deer. Every time you go out of there, you're going to blow out deer because it's right near food sources. Mm-hmm. But I finally, this is well documented. I've talked about this many times in the past in the podcast. This is this little area where I killed Frank, where I found out that as long as I get someone to drive through these fields and spook off the deer or pick me up or something like that, if I get that, I can get out of there and deer will be right back at it the next day. And so this year, the spot I killed Frank, I hunted I hunted that ground blind that I killed him out of, I don't know, 5 times maybe before I shot him, and then hunted 2 other stands within, like a 4-acre, 5-acre area. I mean, I hunted that little tiny 4-acre chunk a bunch. I mean, basically that's all I hunted because that's where it kept showing up. And I don't think I could have done that unless I'd really been careful with the wind and scent control and everything, and then had that exit strategy nailed.
Yeah. You when I look at that place, I couldn't believe you were getting away with what you were getting away with. But that's the thing, from experience, that way better than I do. You know what you can get away with, and you are also taking maybe some risks, because the deer was there and we didn't know how long he was going to be there, and he had a history of not being a homebody, so you're maybe taking some risk, but you know Definitely. What you can get away with on your farm, and it really paid off, man. That was well done. Yeah,
it was funny. Like, every time, just like you said, I did think that every time I went in there, I was like, oh gosh, I can't believe I'm going back in here again. This is the 3rd time, or this is the 4th time, or this is the 5th time. So every time I'm thinking, this is the last time I'm going to be able to get away with this, but I have to do it because this is the only spot who's been showing up. And fortunately, was able to keep getting away with it more and more until finally he slipped up. But but I think when you find those little spots, you got to really figure out the nuances there that make them work. Otherwise, 99% of the time, that first sit, the second sit, that's really your golden opportunity.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, I got some guys I know, some friends, that I'd call them hardcore hunters, and I think that's where most of the mistakes are made, is just not recognizing that, and maybe jumping in a little too soon just because they got the itch to hunt, and they got a food plot, and or this is their their family farm or whatever, and they're just kind of going in with no real plan, with no real intel, just to sit. And, if you don't have that preparation or don't gain that knowledge, that intimate knowledge of the areas you're hunting, I feel like you're at a real disadvantage. And it's not easy to do because it does take some commitment and some time to really, to really learn those, like you said, those nuances of each area. So, it's just, it's a tough thing to do. It takes time, but man, it just pays off huge.
Yeah, it definitely does. So speaking then of kind of figuring out the nuances of spots and all that kind of transitions nicely, I feel like, to your Ohio story, because this is kind of a situation where you learned something new this year, right?
Yeah. Ohio this year, Ohio's kind of been my nemesis. You hear about how good Ohio is, and I've that's one state I have struggled in to consistently, shoot big bucks in, and I don't hunt it very.
It's nice to hear that. Makes me feel a little better that you struggle somewhere.
I don't hunt it much. I rarely hunt it over, 5 or 6 times a year. That's probably a big part of it. And the area I hunt is northwestern Ohio, which is, the county I'm in is in, I think, the bottom 5, for trophy bucks in Ohio. So it's not a real great spot, but it's close to home and gives me another tag and another opportunity. But had some luck there over the years for sure. And it consists of a lot of open ground. Like, this is big farming country, flat, and the cover consists of really small woodlots, anywhere from, a couple acres to, if you had one that was like 7 to 10 acres, that's a pretty big one. So it low deer density, the buck quality, I think, can be good, but I think they just don't, a lot of deer don't survive there. They do a lot of deer drives and there's just not a lot of places for them to hunt. But there's a spot I hunt down there, and there's quite a few other people that that hunt in this area. And I'll go back to early November. I went out to this spot. There's a nice little funnel there where I've had some luck in the past. I killed a buck there in 2008 at the same funnel. And I went in and I was wearing my ghillie suit and I was hunting from the ground. And basically I was just trying to stay mobile. I wanted to kind of, work on some ground hunting. I always try to, I like to improve in different areas of my hunting, and I hunt from the ground quite a bit. And I like to do that more and more. It seems like I'm on the ground more and more these days. But anyway, I wanted to, just do a lot of still hunting, kind of glassing, and see what I could come up with. And I knew there was a couple of good ones in the area. There was a 10-point and an 8-point that I almost shot. I almost shot the 8-point late October, right when we got back from Nebraska. But the 10-point looked like probably a 3-year-old buck, if I had to guess. But he was one, that I would have looked at hard too. And so anyway, the gist of that hunt was I came, as prime time was approaching, I was kind of like sneaking through, the edge of this field and down into this cover. And I just got tucked into this cover where I could see this real skinny field. You can't see it from the road at all. And there's a low spot. And a lot of times, like at dusk, deer will come out into this skinny field in this low spot. And I was just kind of working up to that edge. And I was working up to that. And I was just going to sit the rest of the night because I hadn't seen anything prior. And I'm kind of like hunched over, kind of sneaking down the edge just inside the cover. And all of a sudden I see this deer break into the field, and I'm like, oh man. And I got down on one knee and I put my glass up, and it's that wide 10. And I was like, oh man, there he is. And he's like angling right towards me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really going to happen. Like I didn't have, other than a picture of this deer, I didn't know anything about him. I just know during the rut, there's few spots where, if deer are moving, this is where they tend to go through. And through this skinny field on this low spot, they can't be seen from the horizon in any direction. So it's just a real popular spot for them to get from one patch of cover to the next. And I'm sitting there, and he's kind of angling towards me, working his way into range, and he stops and he looks back from the way he came. I'm like, oh man, there must be more deer coming or something. And then all of a sudden he just takes off. And I'm like, oh gosh, he like runs right by me. No shot. And then I'm just kind of sitting there like trying to figure out what happened. And then all of a sudden I see this guy walk out into the field and he's carrying a crossbow. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like serious, like prime time, walking around. And then I thought to myself, I was like, wait a minute, I'm doing the same thing,
Yeah.
So yeah. So I ended up talking to the guy. I mean, obviously wasn't mad at him. He didn't know. And he was just doing the same thing. He was just out kind of sneaking around. And I didn't know he was out there, and he didn't know I was out there. So we exchanged numbers, and he was planning on gun hunting that area with his brother. And he's kind of telling me, what their plan was and all that. So I actually came out the very next day to set up on that 10 point. And I was like, okay, he came through here, and this was a long shot. My confidence in this hunt was low, but I could hunt, and it was the only thing I had really to go on. So I went back about, 50 yards where that deer came through the cover, and I set up. And I didn't see a deer that night, but I did see his ladder stand. He had a big, giant, elaborate ladder stand, and a scent wick 10 yards in front of it, and a pea bottle, and these giant set of rattling antlers up there. And I was like, oh man, like I was like, this, I gotta rethink this area and get out of here. So yeah. That hunt was a bust. And then I don't know, a few weeks go by. The gun season is approaching.
And were you keeping tabs on this at all as those few weeks went by? Like, did you swing down and check cameras or anything at all, or were you just waiting until later?
I checked cameras one time. I went, and I don't remember exactly the day, but it was probably a week or so after. Hunting was winding down a little bit. Michigan gun season was underway, and I was trying to get, the kids out and, just family stuff. And so hunting was winding down a little bit for me. I still had my Ohio tag, but I don't know, was satisfied with my season, but I wanted to, still give an honest effort in Ohio because I had some time. But I wasn't really planning on gun hunting down there. So anyway, I checked the camera, I don't know, a week or so after that, and there was nothing on it. So I ended up pulling that camera and didn't hunt I didn't hunt again until the day I went out there, and ended up getting my buck. But I went out on the 27th of November, and I was going to basically just go scout. I was going to put another camera up, and the gun season had started. I can't remember what day it was. I think it was the 26th or the 25th of November. So this is gun season had already started here. And this is a spot where, okay, it's a landowner that he pretty much lets anybody hunt if you ask, but he's real particular about certain things. He tells some people they can bow hunt. He tells some people they can gun hunt, and it's just kind of his way to kind of keep control of everything. And quite a few people out there, but usually, I'm one of the guys that's allowed to bow hunt. So even during gun season, I can only bow hunt. But usually during the archery season, not too bad. Maybe a couple guys out there. So I was out there scouting, and basically my plan was to try to find some cover, an area of the property where, maybe the pressure hadn't been so high. I could maybe get into some deer. I was going to pop a camera up. I didn't have a plan other than just to do some in-season scouting and try to find something to go off of. And what I did find out was that these guys had been doing quite a bit of deer drives, and that's the kind of big thing down there during gun season. Deer drives, pretty much every day of the gun season. And I went and kind of scouted some areas where I thought maybe the deer had been pushed into, and I wasn't seeing much. And pretty much was kind of going to call it quits on this particular property and go check out a new area. And I was actually on my way out back to the car. So imagine a big rolling hill of cut beans. And I was walking back, and there's this low spot that kind of, I don't know, between two gradual hills, the beans kind of go down to this low spot. And that low spot, it's almost like kind of like a little drainage, connects the big chunk of cover. When I say big, it's not big, but the thickest chunk of cover where, I had the encounter with the 10-point, where those guys have been doing a lot of their drives, that sort of thing. This drainage connects that all the way for about a half mile through open ground, completely open ground, not a tree anywhere, to this little patch of woods right up by the road. And as I hit that low spot, I look and I see running tracks. I could see them from quite a ways away, and I get up there and I look and I'm like, man, these are big tracks. So don't have any idea what the deer looks like. I had never seen these tracks before. They looked fresh. The deer's running and it's heading towards that patch of cover up by the road, the little wood lot. So I just start walking them. I'm down low. So imagine I'm down low. Nothing can be seen when you're down in this little drainage from, any road or any surrounding area. It's low enough where anything could travel down there and not be seen. And I just start following the tracks, and I start approaching the wood lot, and I'm like, gosh, I wonder if he's in here. And this is a wood lot I feel embarrassed to say, like, I've never even looked at, because you can see it from the road, and those woods that almost look like, like you can see into them.
Yeah.
They're like real wide open. There's no undergrowth. So it never struck me as an area that a mature deer would ever use. And I don't think it is under normal circumstances. I've seen deer in there. I've seen a couple, like a doe and a fawn, pop out of it at dusk. But I've never even thought about hunting it, just because of the lack of cover. But it's kind of like a rolling hill, hardwoods, open. And then at the very top, there is a little thicket there, but it's small, and literally next to the road. And then on the other side, it's next to like a small little highway, kind of. It's not like just a little 2-lane, country highway. So it's like real close to a lot of action. But anyway, I sneak up to this wood lot, and I just you come down low, and then you start coming up to the wood lot. So you're low and you're walking up to the edge, and I peek in there, and I see a deer in there about 60 yards in, walking straight away from me. And all I see was just this giantly wide rack. And I immediately dropped to a knee, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, did he just run out of there? Like when I was scouting, I didn't know, or like, was it from a deer drive? Has he been in there? I didn't know. All these things were going through my mind, and I just watch him, and he walks down into this ravine. The way this woods is set up, there's like a ravine that goes in there, and then it kind of goes up into this hill to a knob on top where there's a thicket. And I see him walking down into the ravine. And I had no bow, nothing. So I was like completely unprepared. I was basically on a scouting mission, and that was it. So I just quickly backed out of there, and I got to my car and immediately got on my phone and looked like what the wind was going to be doing the next day or two, and called the wife and figured out what the plan was. And I couldn't get out hunting until the 29th, which was 2 days. And I looked at the wind, and everything looked good. I think it wasn't perfect, but I thought I could, if he was in there, I thought that I could, if I can get in there without bumping him, I got a chance. I got a really good chance. In fact, I called my buddy Mike, and I said, if he's in there and I can get set up without spooking him, I said, I think I'm going to shoot him. And I just felt like it's just one of those small woodlots where, like, if you can get in there, where's he going to go? You know, everything around him is wide open. I just don't see him, you know, go on out in a wide open field in the middle of gun season. But the real question was he even going to be in there? Is he hiding out in there because of the gun pressure? That was my instinct, you know, that he was hiding out in there. Why else would he be in that type of tiny woodlot? So I went in and I set up. Or initially, my plan was I had my saddle on, but my initial thought was I'm not going to be able to get up into a tree because it's just going to be too risky. So I was just going to try to work my way low in that ravine again, get right onto the edge, and then just kind of scoop my way in just a little bit, just so that I could see, because it's so wide open in there. But as I got closer and closer, I was like, man, he's not going to be in this wide open stuff. He's going to be up in that thicket on the top, especially with the way the wind was blowing. My wind was blowing me towards that direction, but it was kind of like just missing it. And I said, if he's going to be like on the leeward side, he's going to be up in that thicket just off the other side. So that's kind of what I banked on. I was just like, you know, if he's in here, that's where he's going to be, you know. And I peeked in the woods, and you can see, I mean, if there's deer in there, that side of the woods, you can see forever. So I looked, glassed all around. I was like, there's nothing. So he's either not in here or he's up in that thicket. So I was able to set up in a tree. I got set up with my sticks, got all set up on the saddle and everything. Felt real good. And I just waited, and, you know, nothing happens. I just keep glassing up at that thicket up there. You can't see, you can just see the edge where it gets thick. And then when I say thick, it's probably about the size of like a 1,100 square foot house. I mean, it's not big. And then it goes down the backside. So there's like a little knob there. And I'm sitting, and then all of a sudden it's kind of dying down in the evening, and I hear something walking up there. I hear footsteps like in the leaves, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I was like, I just said to myself, it's like, he's up there. I can't believe this. You know, my adrenaline started just pouring, and my heart was going, and I was like, for whatever reason, I got really worked up on this deer. I think because it was like such a long shot, you know, and such a unique opportunity. I wasn't expecting anything like this during the middle of the Ohio gun season, you know. So I'm sitting there, and I hear him moving around, and then all of a sudden I see his antlers crest, and then he starts walking. He comes over the top of the hill, and then he starts walking down to that same ravine I saw him walking down. So he comes down, he kind of side hills down to that ravine. So he's walking the exact opposite way that he was when I first saw him 2 days prior. And he's coming, and I'm like right at the base of that ravine, like just up the other, kind of creates a V, you know, like one hill goes down, then there's a ravine, and I'm on the other side hill. So I can shoot to the ravine and shoot across. And he comes right down, and he ends up, 16 yards from me. And I shot him, and he takes off going back down the ravine, and he tumbles over about, 50 or 60 yards away. And that was it.
Wow.
Yeah, it was incredible. And this deer, he was run down. He's an old deer. I didn't know what he was at first, but he's an older deer that I have had some pictures of. And after talking with, unfortunately, word got out real quick that I had gotten this deer because those other guys were out gun hunting that day. And not that I, was intentionally going to try to hide it from anybody, but it just, on areas where there's other guys hunting, it's a lot of times that can just lead towards, some bad luck for you in the future.
Yeah,
but,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it was just one of those things where there was no way around it because I was by myself, and I went up and talked to the landowner, and then those guys were there, and they found out that I had shot it, and we all went and got it. And they had pictures of that deer from this year and last year. I had pictures of him last year, and one of those guys had actually shot that buck last year in the neck with a gun. and there's a picture of him that was given to me with a giant wound in his neck. So he's a really cool deer. He's super wide, super long main beams, but man, he was in rough shape. He was in really rough shape. And I think I get the sense that he probably wouldn't have made it. His spine was sticking out. His hips were really bony. His body size looked really run down, like more than you would expect. Well, like a buck that rutted hard. You know what I mean? He looked like he was just really in bad shape. So,
wow.
Yeah, man, just a crazy hunt. A lot of luck involved there, but I'm glad I didn't give up on Ohio, because I was really close to just, with all those guys out there and doing deer drives and stuff, like I didn't have a whole lot of confidence in the area,
Yeah. Well, you said this to me back in October when we did our Nebraska podcast, when you said it's very humble of you to say that it was luck, but very rarely is that really the case 100%. Usually there's, the old adage is, what is it? Luck is where preparation meets opportunity. I think that by doing all the preparation and knowing how to make the right decisions at the right times and how to adjust, that kind of stuff is what allows you to take advantage of luck when it does come your way. As I hear you say, kind of walk us through this whole season of yours, and when I think about the fact this is not an anomaly. Last year you killed, 3-4 bucks, and the year before that you did it, and the year before that you did it, and the year before you did that. And as I've alluded to, you're always doing this. Just efficient is the only word I keep coming back to. Just more efficiently than anyone I know. And as I'm trying to pick this apart, listening to you and from seeing what you're doing in the past, I'm going to try to nail down, or let me give you a couple of things that I think are like my takeaways from trying to learn as much as I can from you. And then you tell me what you would add.
Okay.
It seems like your success and the ability to achieve so much hunting success without a big fancy property, without a whole ton of time, without a bunch of vacation days, is that, number one, your level of scouting in the off season and in season is just next level. Just more work goes into that than almost anything. Probably more than the 99% of hunters out there. Number two, part of that preparation, part of that scouting is you have so many different options available that once the hunting season comes, you can cycle through them and you can be in the right spots at the right times based off experience, or you go in there either scouting or observing or hunting and then adjusting as you go through, and then you swing for the fence with many, many of your hunts. You're either kind of observing or you're going for the kill. And you know that you can go for that kill, and it can be a high-risk hunt because you've got another spot you can go to, and another spot you can go to, and another spot you go to. So because of that, your hunts are disproportionately high odds for success compared to the average guy or girl, because you are doing kill sets almost only. It's either kill sets or learning, and you do that all year round, and you don't give up, and then you've gained experience over the years to be able to make the right adjustments when necessary. When I try to drill down at a base level, if I'm trying to like oversimplify this, that's how maybe I would paint the Andy May success model. Did I get it right? Or what would you add?
Yeah.
If there's anything else that makes you so efficient.
I think that's it. I really do. I think you nailed it. All the scouting, the preparation, that's something I enjoy. So to me, that's just normal. And I sometimes forget that. Well, I don't forget. I'm aware of it, but sometimes I don't always, I guess, think of that. Not everybody does that, or not everybody does it as much as I do. And there certainly are guys that do, and some guys that do it more. But that plays a huge role in it, and probably that's the number one factor, is just knowing your area and being prepared and having like you said, a lot of spots to go, and it's kind of setting those up. It's kind of setting the groundwork up for success. And then I always try to locate, $4 or $5. If I'm just talking Michigan and Northern Ohio, because I consider that kind of my home ground. I try to locate $4 or $5. The 4 or 5 best bucks I can find. Usually they're the most mature bucks, and those are the ones I tend to focus around and try to learn as much as I can. And if I only had 1 or 2, I don't think you see as much success. I think our buddy Joe Elsinger said the same thing. I think he takes a similar approach. He tries to find like 6 or 7 bucks to focus on, knowing that he won't be successful on, 2 or 3 or 4 of them, but he will be successful on a couple. So I think that goes a long way, kind of doing the prep and the groundwork to make sure that your season is set up for success, and not going into the season without a plan, and just hoping that, a big one is going to show up, on your spot during the rut, or, I think our guys would have a better chance of success at having a couple of scenarios set up like that.
Yeah.
Utilize everything, utilize public, knock on doors, do whatever you can to kind of set up several of those situations. And then, I think you'll be able to have more success doing it that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And we've talked about this in the past that I'm self-aware enough about myself to be able to recognize that as a spot that I need to improve on. I have fallen victim to sometimes settling for the couple spots I know I've got, and they're usually pretty decent. And then I have a few years found myself having that bite me in the butt. So I think that this conversation is just another great reminder for me that this off season, got to keep on ramping it up. Keep ramping it up every year. And to your point, always try to have plan for success. I think the way you put it there is nice. Have a plan for success that is not asking for luck. You're not dependent on luck. You're not depending on it just happening this year. You've got a plan A, and if that doesn't work, there's plan B. And if that doesn't work, there's plan C, D, E, F. I think if you want to be consistent, that's the right way to go about it. So, Andy, man, I'm glad that you have been so generous with your time and knowledge and experience, because it's helped me a lot personally, and I guarantee you it's helping a lot of people that have been listening over the last 1.5 years, 2 years since we've been able to start talking here. So thanks for that, Andy.
Yeah, no problem, man. It's fun. I love talking about hunting and getting a little more comfortable with it on the podcast. So anytime you want to talk hunting, I'm game.
I think you're going to be stuck doing a bunch more, because I enjoy these. And man, if every year, if we hunt together, if our seasons go as well as it did this year, we're going to have to plan a whole lot more hunts together, because this is a good year for us.
Yeah, no kidding. I was going to say, we're talking about, my season here, but you had a pretty magical season yourself. So I think you're on the right track, man, for sure. You got it. You got a good game plan, and I see good seasons in your future for sure.
Yeah. Well, like both of us often like to say, you always just got to keep getting better, right? Always learning, always improving, and
that's right.
That's my game plan moving forward. So, with that, Andy, I'll let you go. Let's talk soon.
All right, buddy. Thank you.
And with that, the only thing I will add, just to echo what I mentioned at the top of the show, is Merry Christmas, thank you, and until next year, stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. You ever get that feeling the walls closing in, the concrete jungle suffocating you? You crave some wide open spaces, the chance to connect with nature, maybe in a spot all your own. Well, head over to land.com. They've got ranches, forests, mountains, streams, you name it. Search by acreage. You can search by location. You can search by the kind of hunting and fishing you're dreaming of. Land.com. It is where the adventure begins.